Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic Podcast, the podcast where we typically bring you two thematically linked films, one mainstream and one cult. But of course, we're breaking this tradition, as we sometimes do, for this, which is the second part of our pairing called Double Click, which are two films from JANICE.CLICK and Beyond Weird. So last week we talked about the horror fictional documentary Fleischwolf. And this week we're talking about JANICE.CLICK's first feature film, Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars. I have been hassling Janice about this movie for a year. I really have. The first time I saw McMurderer, the first thing I did is send him a message and say, when are you doing a feature film? So I'm very excited. This is another one that has pretty great cover and design. If you go to Dark Hollow Home Video on Instagram or JANICE.CLICK, you can pick up a copy as well. I know there are DVD copies. There may also be VHS copies. So, line up for whatever you prefer. Okay, so this, unlike Fleischwolf, which was sort of a straight, serious horror effort, this is, in typical JANICE.CLICK fashion, a weird, it's not realistic, it's humorous, it's bizarre, utterly crazy, and it is called Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars. And the sort of preview text that goes along with the film is that a bunch of emo kids are murdered and attacked by a scarecrow from Mars. That's relatively close. Yeah, I think that's pretty all right. I think hipster maybe at this day and age, maybe even more than emo. But so anybody who hasn't seen a JANICE.CLICK short film or anything before, go to JANICE.CLICK's website, Instagram, YouTube, watch some of these short films, because I think one thing that sets it apart is they are wild looking. Like visually, they are straight art house movies. The colors are crazy. The cinematography is bizarre. The audio recording is mostly done on camera. There's subtitles sometimes instead of audio. Sometimes there's subtitles and audio. It's an art project. So it's an experience film. And that is good because narratively, they are not always clear. And you kind of have to discover the narrative for yourself in a little bit of a detective fashion. The plot of this movie, as I told you, yes, it's kind of that there are a bunch of emo kids who get attacked by a scarecrow from Mars. It's a little bit more. There are two people who know about the scarecrow, and because it abducted one of their children when the child was 2, and it's been 10 years, so the child should be 12-ish, we would assume. But it abducted this baby, and now it is back for some unknown reason, and it is killing these emo kids who are in the woods to party. Also in Missouri, much like Fleischwolf, this is where Beyond Weird and JANICE.CLICK both reside. I don't even know. Did I even introduce myself? I, of course, am your host, Nate Wyckoff. This is how my mind has been on this movie for years. So now
Who are we and what are we doing here?
Yes, that's actually the effect you tend to get from a JANICE.CLICK movie. And it's kind of nice to dissociate like that. But of course, I'm your host, film critic, and comedian. I hope JANICE.CLICK is proud to have discombobulated me so extremely. Greg Johnson is also here. How are you doing, Greg?
Oh, good. I thought this was High on Crack TV, so I'm a little miffed.
That's one of my favorite moments ever. We'll talk about it. Tad Mastroianni is here. How are you doing, Tad?
For you, Nate, this time I brought my own drugs.
Wah, wah. And Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I'm good, and this movie is the only drugs I need.
Yes, absolutely. I'm high on life now. I'm high on Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars. So, okay. The film it plays sort of like, does anybody remember the PlayStation 1 before even the quote PS1, just the original release of the PlayStation gaming system? Shortly thereafter, Sony released PlayStation Underground, which was like a disc of game demos and background stuff and behind the scenes videos and weird shorts. They even had Mystery Science Theater on there at one time. They always had like weird like graphics everywhere and sketchy film, and it's just supposed to be sort of, ooh, this is weird and underground. That JANICE.CLICK is literally what they were going for. The film effects, I happen to know that Janice uses multiple VCRs and tapes to sort of go back and forth and change the quality of the footage, and there's magnets, all just beautiful, insane stuff. High contrast, really bizarre. Some scenes are the red is off the rails.
Was this my imagination, but was the audio only out of one side or something? Because I tried
That is
this
correct.
over.
For
Okay.
For some of it, it was only out of one side.
Like I tried it
for some of
headphones
it was
and my
stereo, yeah.
speakers. Okay.
Yeah, no,
okay.
some of it was when it first starts out, it's only out of the right. I think it was.
Yes, sometimes
it
it's
stereo,
monaural,
yeah.
but it doesn't.
Absolutely wonderful.
It's not duplicated. Yeah, it adds to the effect. It's really
just
insane.
to fuck with you. Yeah.
The film starts with a couple of I guess aged emo kids, but really, hipsters like us, probably cooler than us, at least myself, skating at a little skate park. And first off, I have to say the music in this movie rocks. The music in Fleischwolf was good. It fit the scene. The music in this is varied and is awesome. And it opens and I'm like, it felt like watching a toy machine or a girl skateboard video, from like the early 2000s, late 90s, where like they'd usually just have footage of skaters from all these crazy angles and stuff, but then they'd also like sometimes they'd actually try and make a narrative out of it. And it felt like that, like this just sort of kids just doing insane stuff. And the driving, sort of post screamo track over that, it just really worked for me. And then we get to them talking about a party in a cabin in the woods. And from there, we follow one of the people as he goes and just walks through Missouri, picks up his, I presume, girlfriend. They go to make out in like, I don't know, a machine shed or something somewhere, or a public bathroom.
I think that we have to point out that the party was specifically for them. The party was for this dude to hook up with his girlfriend, I guess. So
yeah, absolutely.
They decided to jump the gun.
Totally normal.
And go to a public restroom and fool around. But a scarecrow shows up, who just so happens to be from Mars, we think, and kills them. And then that's when the two people who know about the abduction of one of their sons from the past find out about it. Now, I don't really think that the rest of the narrative, I mean, they go and they eventually, this person, again, it's not a spoiler. There's no way I could spoil this movie. Yeah, like, that is the narrative. And things occasionally happen. Part of the joy of a JANICE.CLICK movie is that characters show up with absolutely zero explanation. For example, often in his films, we have Pigman or some variation of Pigman, who is a man with a pig's head. And I love him in this. He gets killed, and when he's killed, he squeals. And there's, I mean, again, when we talked about Fleischwolf, I talked about how before watching this pair, I had seen Alex Garland's new film, Men. And in Men, there are many shots of nature because it's a take on sort of the Green Man myth and masculinity, and it ties the two together. And Attack of the Scarecrow Mars is, in a weird way, sort of made me, it's kind of beautiful in the way that it actually made me feel like it was a tourist recruitment video for Missouri. It's kind of beautiful.
Like, well, it's based on a true story.
It is based on a true story. It is based on a true story, which is revealed at the end. And maybe that's one thing I won't spoil. Yes, JANICE.CLICK lets us know the true story that this is based on.
Yeah, that's
nearing the end of this film.
I think that's worth experiencing yourself.
Yeah, and there's just scenes that are visually compelling, yet I don't really know. I think this is my guess. I think when Janice makes a movie, Janice will like, what goes, something needs to be here, and then it's sort of like a collage. He'll put the pieces where they may not narratively be clear, but you sort of can get the gist, but it also serves to break up a series of scenes that may be similar, so there's a little bit more interest. The film doesn't have a lot of plot, and what plot is there is not particularly clear, but we get insane scenes such as the Scarecrow, after murdering the cabin full of emos, going to wherever it stays and putting in a VHS tape of a naked woman and then freaking out, taking the tape out and breaking it on the ground and putting a different tape in, which is of two cooked stalks of corn, ears of corn, that fornicate with each other. And, and everyone's laughing because yes, this is a thing. They have googly eyes and they have sex, and that's that scene.
The best part of that scene was for me, Nate, is the fantastic. It was clearly, to me, it wasn't a cover, but it was something. You move the song around a little bit to avoid copyright infringement. It's Physical by 9 Inch Nails, and it was spot on. I like the whole time. I was like, I love. That's one of my favorite.
Very Trent Reznor vibes. Yeah, it's pretty wild. My favorite scene, because there's, again, it's clearly not a serious film, but all the characters are serious, except like, for example, if you're not, I feel like it's very difficult to explain a JANICE.CLICK movie. In the flashback where we see one of the leads whose child was abducted in the past, he's having like a good day outside with his child, who's played by a full-grown man with tattoos in a diaper and one of those terrifying man masks where it's just like a mask of a generic white man with no hair, and that's the baby. Until we get to my favorite scene, which is where we see the Scarecrow without his mask, I think for the first time, and he's a gray, he's got a big alien head, and he has the baby doll that's supposed to be the child in this scene, and he's punching it in the side of the head for the camera, and then shaking it and punching it and then holding it up to the camera. It's a wild moment, and it's just one of those things that you experience it. Like, you watching, and I can't even tell you what your brain is doing while you're watching, but I'm rapt. I am just watching this scene unfold. And again, the colors are awesome. There's a scene where the Scarecrow has a vial of mystery yellow fluid, and because of the color saturation, everything, it is just glowing. It's just bursting out of the screen. The film, by the way, is about an hour of runtime, but the actual movie is about 40 minutes. At the end, we get a couple of scenes. One is remixed with the Benny Hill music. The fight scene is remixed with the Benny Hill music, which is totally spot on. And then at the end, the Scarecrow treats us to an acoustic song on guitar,
which was really wonderful. It was like Bo Burnham's Inside if he was a crackhead. So
exactly, yes. If he was in the middle of Missouri, meth past, or future, it's really great. And
that said, the song was actually pretty good.
Yeah, and the song is good. And I will say, JANICE.CLICK does make music. You can follow JANICE.CLICK and Alter Ego as well. Does awesome music projects, varied, plays around as well, so you can dig up that on your own. And as I said, the music in this movie in general is pretty varied, but it's awesome. I'm going to move to what everybody thinks now. Mandy, what were you expecting? Because you weren't on McMurderer's watch list before. What were you expecting from Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars, and what was your experience now that you've watched it?
You're correct. I did not watch McMurderer with you. It was one I missed. So I don't know, I was expecting some super crazy shit, and that is exactly what I got. The credits and post-credits extras really made this whole experience for me and was completely outside my expectations. I was watching the runtime a little bit because, again, it was my standard complaint. The movie was too slow. It was paced too slow. And so I was like, how are they going to fill this entire hour? This is ridiculous. I think I might die of boredom somewhere along the way. And then it was clearly it was wrapping up 15 minutes early. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Are they just going to run 15 minutes of Patreon names or some such nonsense at the end?
Which many films do.
Then we got the real content and artistry of this project. The front half whatever. It's a goofy film where they did some stuff. It reminded me a lot of the movies that me, my brother, and my cousins would try and make, like on the farm, like in the summer. Like my family owned a dairy farm, or like my cousin's family owned a dairy farm, and like a lot of the scenes were like walking through a big field. I'm like, that was us. That was us doing bad movie stuff in a field, like they are. But then like the second half, I'm like, oh no, we could not have done this. Like this is special. Like this is art. I guess
There's
like,
this fantastic there's this fantastic moment like in the post-credits scene, mid-credits somewhere in there, where like the
Yeah.
camera shows somebody talking on a phone and he turns around and it credits him as producer and he's like, no, fuck,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be in your fucking Scarecrow movie.
Yeah. It was
And
awesome.
then yeah, it was
Oh, and
a
also
delight.
the, like you already mentioned, the corn on the cob pornography, which is why I showed up to the podcast this week, was inspired, I shall say.
Yes.
I don't know where they came up with that, but it was the bright spot in the first half, like the actual movie section. So yeah. So anyway, that's my take on this. Like,
Tad.
and also my brain is melted.
Well, you know, that if not before the movie, after the movie for sure. Tad, you and I, of course, are huge McMurderer fans and Janice.CLIck fans.
Absolutely.
What were you expecting versus what did you come away with now?
I expected a follow-up to McMurderer, and boy, howdy did I get it. I was impressed throughout, and this is one of those things. Like, one of the reasons why I had a problem with Fleischwolf is I was sort of expecting this level of attention to detail. Now, the way I look at this, and I would be interested to hear what these guys actually think when they create this stuff, but the amount of time they spend on the visuals, on the feel of it, and you know, I stated it, Amanda stated it. These are like little works of art. There's so much involved that as far as I can tell, if you take that whole production layer off the film, it's just another no budget film. Adding this layer on top of it makes it so that I don't care what the plot is. I do not care how shoddily it's filmed. I am only engrossed in just looking at it and going, how the fuck did they do this? And it transfixes me like minutes after the scene's already over. I mean, the most normal thing I've ever seen from these guys is that intro, which I thought was badass. It's just this crappy skate punk, like mid.
It took me right to our high school, like going out with Swell Greg, you know,
yes.
and just
and the music fit fantastically, and I just love that they have the fake bite it scene where it's clearly like they didn't try really hard to make it look like it hurt, but he rolls over and he's like, oh, and I'm like, that's the shit that you and I would do in certain films when we did fight scenes, and it's like, well, we got to make sure we don't accidentally crack a head open while we're doing this. It's just the filters, the VCR work, the sound, the sometimes jarring, like the frames will stop or split.
Yeah.
Stuff like that just makes the film. And it's like,
and I don't even know, like a lot of it, I don't know if filters are used or not. They very certainly could be, but a lot of it is analog. Like I think the majority of his work is, I mean, he really does. Like, in fact, I urge you guys to follow on Instagram, follow Janice.CLIck, as well as Beyond Weird and Dark, Hollow Home Video. But because, for example, I know Janice is working on his new movie right now, and he posted, he's using a green for one of the tapes that he's recording to. He's using a green VeggieTales tape because they're green, and that's great. And it caught fire in the VCR. Like, this is, you know, this is the insane mix of old technology with current times. And there's this, Jeff was totally dumbstruck by Tad and I's losing it over McMurderer, but it is because it is like, there is nostalgia wrapped in the technical uniqueness, wrapped in the artistic visual appeal for me of this movie and Janice.CLICK's works. And I really don't know. And also I'm going to say the logo for Attack of the Scarecrow on Mars is pretty awesome. It's super pulp. The logo for Fleischwolf we talked about last week is great, but it just makes, every time I see it, it just makes me think of Jägermeister. and this one totally makes me think of Misfits album / horror comic slash drive-in.
There
and I
you
love it.
go. It's famous monsters and shit.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so anyway, yes, I agree. The visually, I'm always watching it, and there's some interesting camera choices too beyond the technical side of the production, post-production, where like it follows someone for a long walking scene through this beautiful scenery, but like it's always roughly over the shoulder, over right shoulder, over left shoulder. And those are smart choices from a composition setup. Again, the narrative is light, so it's a lot of filling time, but I find it really engaging to look at. Could it have been? Well, let's look at Greg. Greg watched McMurder, I think, after, because he wasn't on the episode, right? I think you heard it and then watched McMurder. What were you expecting from Attack of the Scarecrow on Mars versus what did you get?
I thought it was gonna be crazier. I thought it was gonna be just this like absolutely impossible to follow mess, but it had a very clear beginning, middle, and end, and then a second end, and then a third end. Yeah, I dug it. I thought it was fun. I thought it would be like just impossible to follow, so I kind of appreciated that it had a narrative to it, and it had these kind of strange vignettes in there, and it felt like a full feature. Whereas, I did watch McMurder after the fact. McMurder felt like a VHS tape that I found that 7 different people tried to re-record over, and it left just scrapped bits of everyone's.
Yeah, and I appreciated that approach, because I will say that oftentimes the difference, and I don't want to say Tommy Wiseau's name here. I'm a huge Tommy Wiseau fan. I'm hoping that he'll crowdfund his next feature just so I can be a part of it. But although he certainly doesn't need it, the money. I like that Janice clearly understood that for a feature length film, and it's only an hour, but for a feature film, there had to be somewhat of a clear narrative. Whereas with his short films, yes, there's a story or pieces of narrative, but it doesn't have to be completely cohesive in the way that this one does. And by cohesive, we mean it's one step towards cohesive. I want to ask you guys about this scene. There was this weird scene when we're with the Scarecrow / alien, where it appears as though he may be flashing back to a bunch of little Scarecrow like hand figures being burnt in a fire. Do you guys remember that? It's actually a brief moment, but I was like, is this supposed to be an explanation of why he's abducted this child? Did people burn the Scarecrows? And was that his family? Where am I jumping with this? You know what I mean? Like, did anybody remember that? Is that the case?
I think it was drugs, Nate. I think it was.
I think sometimes, especially like, the only thing that frustrates me sometimes is there's a detail that I want to see, but because of the way the movie's filmed, you can't see it. So my brain probably glossed over it when it's a fire.
Yeah, and again, not a bad thing for rewatches, but like it's just like I'm like, is that, or am I making that up? We do that. I do that with Seaver sometimes. I'll talking to Chris, I'll be like, this moment, and he's like, that's not a thing. I didn't do that, like for that reason. And I'm like, but I think you did. And he's like, I know what I think. And so, but anyway, I really enjoyed it. I loved just the design of the Scarecrow. Again, this is all low budget stuff, but having a sack over the head and the hat and the jumpsuit with the red scarf and the plaid undershirt, and then like taking it off and having the alien mask. It's one of those cases where the degraded film hides all manner of sins, and it looks really cool. I can't, as a lover of 50s science fiction movies, I cannot not tell you that there is definitely the popcorn-esque like flying saucer. Real quick, Greg's got to go. Does Greg give a recommendation for this movie? Yes or no, and why?
Yeah, I definitely do. It was a treat to watch. Like Mandy had said, that the last 15 minutes, it's a treat for you after you watch this. Also, I loved whatever weird beat they picked for a lot of the time when characters talk. It felt very Persona like just a weird like
Yeah.
jazz, like every time someone interacts with each other, the music just shifts drastically into like this smooth, mellow tone while people are having a conversation. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm very impressed. It, like you said, the nostalgia in it of like of you know what, like I remember watching VHSs of shows I would record just to rewatch them, before, it was easy to buy mass market VHSs or DVD collections, etc. And they would always be a little bit grainy, always a little bit shitty. And
Yep.
this feels like someone's like recorded film that there was also commercials. They couldn't quite cut the film
out.
just right
Yeah.
to get it out. But I think the optimum Janice.CLIck viewing experience is you have to be almost like mailed a link to these on YouTube from some like series of letters and numbers email that you're like, I think it's a virus, but I'm kind of interested. And you click it, and then you sit there and you're like, I think that was someone's movie that they just emailed from a spam bot. And all right, pretty good. So,
and I'm not going to confirm nor deny this, but Janice.CLIck has reportedly left VHS copies of his films across the United States in woods, in Goodwills, all sorts of places. So find these cursed tapes wherever cursed tapes are found. Let's move into the recommendations, because we could talk all day about all the weird, bizarre choices and things in these movies. But really, as I said, it's an experience. I think you kind of have to watch it. And I hope that I've made you want to watch it. Obviously, I recommend this movie. I recommend all of Janice.CLIck stuff. Janice has also put out a compilation, like a feature-length compilation, a remix of a lot of other works called Mega Cursed. Definitely check that out as well. Mandy, would you recommend Attack from the Scarecrow on Mars? If so, why and to who?
I would recommend this to the subset of my friends who I know listen to this podcast every week. Not really,
Woo!
but if you do.
Yeah.
Those friends of mine who are always looking for like the next worst crazy movie, like kind of like this smells bad, like you smell it kind of situation. Like this movie's so bad, like you watch it, and they were always looking for like that next weirdest, next worst, next craziest, painful film. I would recommend it to them. Like watch this. You will not be disappointed. You will have new bragging rights for like the craziest, most fucked up shit. That you can show to other people to basically say like, this is some fucked up shit that I watched. Like you watch it too. But it is also fun. Like there were movies that were like painful and terrible, and you were like, oh yeah, no, these are really just bad. Worst movies. But this is just like out there, but it's also funny. And like we said, that the post credits like absolutely make it. It's almost like a super long joke that someone is telling that doesn't seem very funny. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh, I get it now. Like, that's amazing. You're a comic genius. I feel like this movie was the movie, like it was like that kind of joke, but in movie form.
Yeah, I actually shared Janice.CLIck and his material with my accountant this year. And that was an odd choice, because now I'm really interested to see what my taxes come out as for this following year, because I definitely think he looks at me different now. Tad, would you recommend Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars? And I think I know the answer, but why, and if so, to who?
I was gonna say, come on, man, while this movie did not impact me the same way that McMurderer did, because I honestly want a bumper sticker that says I'm the fucking clown, and I'll probably never get it. But again, the reason I recommend this is
think
because
Nate's gonna get you one for Christmas.
Yes,
Write
this
it
is not
down, Nate.
These are not movies to watch for plot. These are not movies to watch for for analysis outside of the stuff I've already talked about. These are movies to watch and just marvel at the amount of effort that is put in and the amount of thought that's put into this sort of style. This is for people who understand vaporwave music, which it's, bear with me. Vaporwave is sort of a nostalgia bait-ish synthesis of old like 80s music and like mall type music. this movie kind of feels like vaporwave in like a short film form. It triggers that nostalgia, but it's so jarring because the music is kind of supposed to be unsettling sometimes at the same time. And the whole time I'm just enthralled because as a former amateur filmmaker, I just look at it and go, I wish I had thought of stuff like this because I technically was doing stuff like this. It's just I just never thought to just bend the entire film in a way that's this creative. There's no way I would have ever thought of that. And here it is.
Yeah, it's sort of like the whole like it feels complete, yet I would never have been able to complete it, if that makes it. Like it's just, you know, when you see a work of art and you're like, I love this, and I know it's beyond the scope of my style, thinking, creativity. Like it's just a little beyond. It's different, and because of that, it's a reason why I love it so much. So that's it, guys. You gotta check these films out. Both Fleischwolf, which we talked about last week, an Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars by JANICE.CLICK. You can follow them on Instagram. Greg also mentioned sort of the synthy soundtrack moments being pretty great. That's, I believe, material by Caleb Lail. You can follow Caleb on Caleb, CALEB, Lail, LAIL, music with a K on Instagram. I actually believe that the Attack of the Scarecrow from Mars album is releasing this week online, so you can actually probably pick that up. Any who's its, thank you guys so much for listening. Please review us for max stars wherever you get your podcast. It really helps other people find us, as well as tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everyone to listen to Cult and Classic Podcast. Please go to our website, cultandclassicpodcast.com. There's going to be big things coming. Sign up for our newsletter, which is not out yet, but we will be releasing it in the near future. So you can pre-sign up to get those when they arrive. And to play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.